Hi, I'm Nick Polce of Gateway Properties, and you're watching The Open Gate. Welcome to The Open Gate. I'm Nick Polce here at Gateway Properties, and I want to welcome Wayne Kwasniewski here as my guest here on our podcast, episode 2.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
And we're going to talk today about fishing, hunting in the Adirondacks and the Tug Hill area, and Wayne's going to give us some highlights on this. So you've got a lot of background in forestry, and your family does up on the Tug Hill area, and we'd like to hear a little bit about it and what you can tell us, especially the Moose River Plains up out of inland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, my background is both sides of my family. My mother and my father's family were in the logging and lumber business, and so I got a good dose of it growing up. Started working in my grandmother's sawmill when I was 12 years old, sorting dimension stock for Sargent's Furniture Factory in Boonville, New York, and that's where it all started. And from there, when I was in high school, I went into the woods crew and harvested timber with my grandfather, and my father and his brother started J&C Lumber after World War II when they came back from the war, and they were contractors for Gould Paper Company, and they had a lumber camp on the Moose River Plains during the late 50s, and so my family history has been in the lumber business, since the late 40s, and then from there, when I graduated high school, I went to Paul Smith College. I received a forestry degree there, and I worked temporarily for the DEC, and I worked for my grandparents' lumber company, and they had a woods crew. I worked for them. We contracted for IP, International Paper, and Georgia Pacific. And then eventually my father and I started our own logging business. And then after that, when my dad retired and I was on my own, I also worked as a forester, as a consultant forester for Landvest and for the Molpus Woodlands Group, and until I retired. And that's pretty much all these years my background in the forest industry.
And you're still timbering a little bit. I mean,
I still kept some of our equipment when my dad and I were logging, and through the years in this business, I've acquired a sizable amount of acreage of timberland, and I still harvest a little timber on my own property yet to this day.
And because it's in your blood and you love it.
Yeah.
And then the neat thing is I like about is while you're cutting timber, you're looking at tracks and figuring places to hunt and trap and everything, and it all rolls into to this.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. I mean, growing up working even before I was old enough to work in the harvesting aspect of it, I used to go with my grandfather up on Tug Hill and the old Gould Paper Company track. And when we were just kids, my brother and some of our friends we grew up with in town, we were 10, 12 years old. We would ride with him on a weekend up on his job. He'd drop us off on some logging road on that 45,000 acre track, and with a frying pan and fish bowls, we were just little kids, and we fished. And then at the end of the day, we'd stand in the logging road and wait for my grandfather to pick us up. So,
awesome.
so growing up in the industry, it was almost like a natural progression. You fished, you wanted to trap, you wanted to hunt, and so on.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I find the Moose River Plains to me is a fascinating area. As well as Tug Hill, but the Moose River Plains to me was a rugged area, and they used the Lynn tractors and the whole history of the Gould Paper Company bringing the timber out in the wintertime and floating it down the stream. I mean, that all ended in the 40s.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, but
you know where a lot of these old camps are.
Yeah, well, on Tug Hill, I know where all of their major lumber camps were. They were all numbered, and there's still remnants of them there today. But my dad and my uncle worked when Gould Paper Company owned the Moose River Plains, it was, just shy, I think, 70,000 acres. And of course, there was more than just them contracting up there because the property was so vast. They had several lumber camps up there, but they worked there, I think, from 55 until they sold the property to the state in 1960. And it's, if you drive up there now, like we were up there last summer or late spring, we went fishing up there in a couple lakes, and I took you down and showed you where the camp was. And I mean, once you see the pictures, since you've been there and you see the pictures I've got, it doesn't look anything like it did back then.
No.
Matter of fact, I took my dad and I went up there where the lumber camp was in 1981. He wanted to go deer hunting up there and just reminisce. And when we were hunting up there, he says there was better timber there in 1981 than there was when they harvested timber there in the late 50s.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, yep. I know when we go up there now, I mean, now as old as I am, I can see where they cut hard and where they've cut hard and what came back, and it's nice. It's not. I mean, for the brook trout fishing, it's not what it was back years ago, but at least we can go places and catch brook trout up there. Yeah, it's a very beautiful area, and history is unbelievable up there.
Yeah, and don't forget when Gould's owned the Moose River Plains, they were still, Gould Paper Company in Lyons Falls was still a softwood pulp mill, paper mill. They used softwood, spruce and fir, and so that was primarily what they were after when they logged the Moose River Plains. They really didn't cut much hardwood. Towards the end, before they sold the property, before Gould sold it, they did cut some birch veneer. In the late 50s, they harvested some yellow birch veneer. But I mean, far as they didn't cut any hardwood pulp. They didn't cut any. They weren't after the maple or the cherry or soft maple. Hard soft maple was birch. But I mean, the primary thing they were after was spruce and fir. And in I think right after Gould sold the Moose River Plains, 1960 or 61, Gould Paper Company in Lyons Falls converted to a hardwood mill, and then they started using hardwood pulp because, the river drives were over, and they'd cut most of the spruce on their Tug Hill tract, and they sold their Moose River Plains. They still own their McKeever tract, but I mean, they'd cut most of that spruce too.
And in the center of the plains there, it was a popular yarding area for the deer.
Oh, yeah.
And you remember hearing something about when they came in and they wanted to thin the herd out or whatever while your father was logging back there.
If you go up there now, there's deer there. A lot of guys hunt there. And I mean, there's still some pretty good bucks harvested there every year. But don't forget, it's been 60 years since a tree was cut on that property.
Yeah.
And my dad said when they were working there in the 50s, there was deer everywhere there. He said you had to be careful when you drove out of the logging road there in the evening or early in the morning that you didn't hit a deer on the logging road. They were jumping across the road. And, of course, back then when Gould's owned it, they leased it to hunt clubs. So, I mean, it was closed off to the public unless you were a member of one of them hunt clubs. They couldn't hunt while they logged there because all the property was leased to hunting clubs.
Wow.
So, and then sometime after they sold the property to the state, for some reason, the state went in there in the yards and shot off a bunch of deer. I don't know what was the purpose of that, whether they figured it was the population, it was overpopulated or what. And you talked to a lot of the old timers, they said the hunting was never as good as after they did that. The hunting went downhill from there. But I mean, I suppose the DEC will it's debatable whether that is I think the main reason is the habitat loss.
Yeah.
Deer are not a old growth forest animal. They need to have the crown broken and
need something in the understory.
Yeah, you need an understory, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, how do you think the timber business is today, the forestry, and I mean it's sort of sad what's going on.
Yeah, we've talked about this, me and you, many times. For the last 30 years, the local forest industry here in upstate New York has been in a downhill spiral for a long time, and it just seems like it's getting worse and worse every year. I mean, just we've talked about it. Just think of all the mills and the industries that have shut down just in our lifetime. You know,
Yep.
you know, all these we've lost our two major paper mills, Ethan Allen, Hardin's, Library Bureau. The Union Tool in Frankfurt.
Oh, yeah.
We've lost so many markets. The only paper mills left here in New York that buy roundwood are International Paper in Ticonderoga, which is you got to truck the pulpwood 200 miles.
Yeah.
And then Finch Paper in Glens Falls, and that's not much closer. That's over 150 miles, and the market is so far away.
I didn't get into the business until '84, and I know you got a lot more years in there before me. But I know you talked about the Japanese maple market there when they were building bowling alleys, and I remember coming in. As I came in, it was just the tail end had ended, but I remember hearing about it. I remember your family buying a big track up there where our camp was. And
the McHale lot. Yeah, my dad sold out of my dad and my uncle, when they went into business after the war, it was J&C Lumber Company. Joe Kwasniewski, Chet Kwasniewski was my father. So it was Joe and Chet, J&C Lumber. And they had a softwood mill in West Leiden. But my dad sold out, I don't know, sometime in the early 60s. And then my other uncle, Henry, they called him Hank, him and my Uncle Joe built a state-of-the-art hardwood mill in the early 60s in Swampscott Mills. And that's where they made their money in the late 60s when the Japanese went bowling crazy, and they made a lot of money sawing a lot of the hardwood lumber went to Japan to make bowling alleys. And we've always had the
AMF.
What is it? It's Quebeca AMF now, but they still make bowling pins there today.
Yeah.
It's one of the few industries that's hung on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. We lost Hardin Furniture, lost Ethan Allen over here, Bailey has stopped sawing here in Boonville, and it's too bad. It really is.
Yeah, and you stop and think, and then you're not even mentioning the small sawmills. You know, in Ava, New York, there used to be 4 or 5 sawmills there. They all employed people. My grandparents' mill, with their logging crew and everything, they employed 30 people. And my Uncle Joe was a supervisor in the town of Ava. And he always bragged that when he was supervisor that there was nobody on welfare in the town of Ava, because anybody that was capable of working, if they needed a job, he would give them a job at his sawmill. And all that is gone in this area now.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad. Yep.
The list is almost too long to comprehend of all the mills and industries in the forest industry that have went out of business in this area.
Yeah. I don't think any of us stayed in it just for the money. We stayed in it because we love the woods.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people don't understand. I think
well, that's another thing. And then I'm talking about the end users of the logs products and pulp, the sawmills and the paper mills. Now talk about the logging contractors. There used to be small logging contractors everywhere around here, and now it's almost like it's the same as these giant corporate dairy farms where you got to be milking 3,000. You got to be milking round the clock, to make any money. Now, if you want to stay in the business of a logging contractor, you've got to be fully mechanized,
putting out volumes.
Yeah, and we've talked about this also. The price of the forest products is never
caught up
with the times or the inflation.
Right.
So these big mechanized crews now, they make their money on volume. Where when me and you were logging, we were marketing our wood, trying to get the maximum value we could for our product. We sort and veneer, saw logs, pulpwood, and shipping whoever was paying the most, and trying to squeeze the most money out of our product. But now these huge, fully mechanized crews, it's just volume. They got to produce so much wood in a day to make ends meet, and it's almost like it's the same as these dairy farmers that are milking round the clock.
Yeah.
And so all these small logging contractors have gone out of business. I wonder. You look for a small logging contractor to cut, say, maybe a 20-acre woodlot. You don't want to move a fully mechanized crew, and they want a fully mechanized crew won't even move in on a lot unless it's 100 acres because they'll blow through that in a week or two.
Yeah.
So you look
true.
for a small logging contractor to maybe cut a 20-acre lot. You can't find anybody.
No.
And not only that, a lot of landowners today don't want that huge equipment on their property from these fully mechanized crews.
True.
So
Yep.
the industry, just in my life, it's changed tremendous.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I don't know if it's for the better either.
No.
It's sad because you can't get the forestry. You can't you can't weed out the junk and try and grow good crops if we're losing all these industries.
Yeah.
Losing all these businesses there that bought up stuff. You're just not going to be able to do it in years to come.
Yeah. And then, we talked about it the other day. We lost our cogen plants here, and that was we lost a valuable management tool.
Exactly.
When and there's no chip market unless you've got a $1.5 million flail chip harvester, and you can get a contract with International Paper to take clean paper quality chips to Ticonderoga, or you can get a contract with, say, the pellet mill in Schuyler. But far as chip and hog fuel for making electricity, that's all gone. And not to get political, but it was the state legislature that shut down the cogen plant at Fort Drum, the only military base in the country that produced their own power. In the state of New York's legislator, in their ultimate wisdom, said that burning woody biomass is not a renewable resource, so they shut it down.
Gosh.
I always said, I guess I got to go back to forestry school because something's changed since I was there 50 years ago. Tree is not a renewable resource anymore.
Well, I just don't understand. We put a lot of plastic in the ground. And I myself, I just think, if we could lean more into wood to produce paper products or something that it rots down in 60 days. And the amount of plastic we put in the ground is unbelievable.
And this myth that everybody's going paperless and we're not going to need paper anymore. That's the biggest myth in the country. International Paper in Ticonderoga, I think they're either the number 1 or 2 paper machine in the country. They've got orders clear through 2026. These mills have got paper orders, a year or more in advance. Look, pick up your mail every day. We're using more paper today than we ever used. So this myth that we're going paperless isn't true. We've got to have these pulp mills to make paper.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about these carbon credit programs? I don't know if we've talked about that.
Oh man, get me going on that.
Yeah,
well,
they're buying up these large tracts up here in Tug Hill in the Adirondacks, and
in theory, I guess it's a good thing. Trees sequester carbon. If you're worried about carbon emissions, but the problem is, like you just said, they're purchasing up these large industrial timber tracts, tens of thousands of acres, and take Tug Hill for instance. When Gould's sold it, Lions Falls Pulp and Paper, it was 45,000 acre tract there in the core of Tug Hill, and then Lions Falls Pulp and Paper sold it to Hancock Timber Resource Group. Then they sold it to another investment group. They're called TIMOs, Timber Investment Management Organizations. And they sold it to, I can't remember the exact name who they sold it, but then that company sold it to, it was I got to back up. The TIMOs, they hire these outfits to manage the investor. They look for money to place on a piece of property. So it was Metropolitan Life Insurance Citigroup. Same when Hancock Timber Resource Group owned Tug Hill. It was a division of Hancock Insurance. They're the only ones got any money,
right.
And they look for a place to invest the money. So they hire these TIMOs, and they're the ones that manage it. So they give them the money, they place it on the land, and then I worked for Landvest and the Mulpus Woodlands Group, and we would manage it for these clients that bought the land. Well, when Mulpus managed Tug Hill, it was owned by Metropolitan Life and Citigroup. And we managed, I think they owned it. I worked for them 2007 till almost 2020.
About 13
But we
years.
were intensively harvesting the timber on that property. I mean, it was when Hancock sold the property, the Nature Conservancy bought it from Hancock, and then they kept 15,000 acres and they sold the remaining 30,000 acres, and that's what we managed. And so we were cutting timber on there, managing the timber for, almost 10 years, and then they sold it. They sold it to another outfit, I won't mention any names, but they sold it to a company that's selling carbon offsets, carbon credits. What that is they get, if a company somewhere's like in California, where they have strict emission standards, if you can't meet the standards, you can pay some timberland owner not to cut so many acres of land.
That makes you feel all warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, so I mean, it in theory, it sounds good, but the problem is they didn't do anything to cut back on their emissions. And in the end, what happens is they pay for the right to keep on polluting at the expense of poorer communities. That's what's happened on Tug Hill. When Mulpus managed the Tug Hill tract, it was called the Corrigan tract. That was the name they gave it because that was the fund that it was under. We hired local foresters. We hired local logging contractors. We hired local road construction companies to maintain our 35 miles of road infrastructure. And we provided forest products to local mills all over the Northeast in Canada.
Right.
And now that's all gone away because this company that owns it now is they claim they're going to harvest some timber. We've yet to see any since they've owned it. They've owned it a couple of years now. They haven't cut any wood. But I mean, that's all gone away, and so the local community suffers because these contractors aren't able to work on that property. Right. And so.
And I've been in this business 40 years, and there isn't a woodlot that I've been in that doesn't have a barbed wire fence around it or a stone wall. So my personal opinion is we have more woods today than we ever did. Versus, we had more farmland years ago, cleared farmland.
Well, New York State is more forested today than it was 100 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like 61% forested.
Yep.
I mean, people that don't know, they're outside the industry. I mean, New York State is like 61% forested.
Right. I mean, look what happened.
They think we've cut all our trees down. I mean, and it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Look what happened after the Civil War. There,
I think
the country was building.
I think the industry nationwide did the calculations, and we're still growing. There's still more growth every year than volume of growth than there is what's harvested every year. But
I believe that.
yet we're importing lumber from New Zealand and Canada and other places. And look at the recent fires in California. I mean, they got all the headlines. It was a tragedy, and I feel bad for them people. But just a few years ago, there was a couple of fires in Northern California in old growth, where a lot more people. 18,000 homes were destroyed, and over 100 people were killed. But it wasn't in Malibu, so you didn't hear about it. But I mean, if they would manage the national forest a little better, you could prevent a lot of these fires. Right. Plus, put more forest products on the market. Why are we importing lumber from other countries when we're the largest lumber producer in the world?
Exactly.
So.
Okay, we're going to take a little break here, and then we'll be back
in
a few minutes. Looking to list or buy property in the upstate New York region? Look no further than Gateway Properties. We're a small boutique agency with high integrity and over 39 years experience. Give us a call today or visit our website, gatewaypropertiesofupstateny.com. Okay, so here we are back, open gate with Nick at Gateway Properties in Remsen, New York, and this is episode 2. And my good friend Wayne Kwasniewski is sitting here, and Wayne and I have been friends for probably 40 years. I originally met his father down to Poland Sawmill one afternoon. I know it's about, and we used to see each other quite a bit, and I knew of his family from years ago. But we're going to talk a little bit about the hunting and fishing in the Adirondacks and Tug Hill area, and we even got a little bit to talk about on caribou hunting that we did up in Quebec. But we've been on a lot of hunting and fishing trips, and didn't always get really successful, but we've always had a good time.
Right.
As long as the food is good, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, and the accommodations.
Yeah.
So here I am with Wayne Kwasniewski.
Yeah, I think when I really met you is I came on your landing one time and bought some basswood veneer logs.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Bradford Veneer in Bradford, Vermont used to buy basswood veneer logs, and I came on your landing and bought some basswood veneer logs, and that's how I really first met you.
Yep.
You had met my dad delivering logs at the mill in Poland there,
Yep.
but I mean that's where we first met each other. Yeah.
Yep. I remember talking to your dad, and I said, gee, you guys real busy? Yeah, we're real busy, but I got my son up there cutting in the woods. We're okay to keep talking. I said, well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So Wayne's, you're into tracking big bucks and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
which you've been really successful. I know, being in your trophy room, I've seen a lot of your trophies. You always shoot a nice buck every year. So you got that pretty down pat, you think? Or?
Well, I don't know if you ever. I don't know.
And
if
you got
ever,
a camp way back in.
Yeah. I own property in the core forest at Tug Hill.
And incidentally, a guy, you could live back in that camp. Buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody bother you.
Yeah. Yeah, I hunted. It was my grandfather's property, 400 acres there, and he was an inholder in the old Gould Paper Company property there, the 45,000 acres, and it's been in the family now. My uncle inherited it. My grandfather's son inherited it, and then I purchased it from him. He was going to sell it, and then I ended up purchasing it. So it's been in the family, that property, over 70 years, I think. And I started hunting there, fishing and trapping there when I was about 13.
I know you took me up there when you first acquired it, and I thought you were crazy because the place had been all cut off, and you were going to put your food plots on the original landing areas, the staging areas for the timber. But now to see it this many years later, it's like a whole different place.
Yeah, my uncle got in a little financial dire straits, and he kind of over-harvested the timber, and so. But I mean, actually in the end, it was to my advantage. I was able to purchase the property back then. Let's see, I purchased it in 1997, and real estate market on Tug Hill or anywhere here in northern New York wasn't anything like it is today.
No.
You could still, property was still affordable, and so we bought the property, and it's a testament. You've been up there now. You saw it when I purchased it, and you've been up there recently, last Labor Day, and during hunting season, and it's a testament how fast the timber really does grow,
God.
on Tug Hill.
I don't even recognize it now.
I'm in the 480A Forest Tax Law program with that property, and I've got a saw log harvest scheduled for possibly 2 years, 2027. And I mean, if you'd have looked at that property in 1997 when I purchased it, you wouldn't have thought it was possible.
Right.
But I mean, it does, even on Tug Hill, as slow as timber grows on Tug Hill, it grows faster than you think. But anyhow, yeah. So I improved the property. It wasn't just a timber investment. It was, I wanted to keep the property in the family, and hopefully I
Harvest a nice buck off it every year.
Yeah, and hopefully my heirs will keep it in the family.
Right.
But I usually kill a decent buck, or one of us, my grandson or my son or my son-in-law kills a decent buck there every year. But I mean, it has more hunting pressure than say the Central Adirondacks, but
you think so?
we have a lot of fun there. And
right. That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
I mean, but I mean, you've been on some numerous trips too. For well, we did that whitetail hunt down in North Carolina. I mean, you know, I know I shot a deer down there. I could have carried it out under my arm, but I mean, deer are a lot smaller down there.
Yeah.
But we had fun on the caribou trips there. I like that.
Yeah, we had it. Yeah, when was I think that was what 2003.
Yep, 2003.
We went. Yeah,
Yep.
that was a
Up
blast.
in Quebec. Yep.
Yes.
And the fishing was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if we had fishing around
Well, that's
here,
what at that time when them Quebec caribou hunts, if you went in September yet when the fishing season was still open up there, it was probably the best deal in North America. You could harvest
and
you
hunt.
could harvest 2 caribou, and it was world class fishing. The fishing was almost better than the hunting. It was
Fantastic.
unbelievable, the fishing.
Yep.
You know. But we
had some good times up
We had a
there.
lot. We had a lot of fun, and half of the fun was getting there. You know, we drove instead of flying to.
Montreal.
I think we could have drove to Montreal and then flown to
LG up to the
LG
Polaris River.
Yeah, one of them.
Yep.
Excuse me. There was a small airport there on the Trans-Tigga Highway there.
Yep.
You could have flown into, but we opted to drive. You know, as the 4 of us went, and we saved quite a bit of money. But the trip driving there was an adventure.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yep.
Yeah, we drove.
I mean, you tell people about it that they can't believe there's places like this left, where the roads literally end, and where we went was 2-hour seaplane flight up north of that.
Well, before that, driving there, I don't know how familiar people are with Quebec, but Val d'Or, we drove through Val d'Or, which was the largest open gold mine in the world, and it runs 24/7. And then beyond that, we came to Matagami, and then that's where you get on the James Bay Highway. Remember,
We had to sign in.
remember it was gated. We had to sign in, tell where we were going, what our ETA was,
Right.
and how many in our group.
And approximately 180 miles in was the government gas station and food.
Yeah, that was.
And you had to stop.
It's like 400 miles from Matagami to Radisson.
Right.
It's all paved, but there's only one place in the middle on that highway you can get gas,
The
and you have
government-
to stop and get
yep,
gas there.
Yep.
And so if you don't show up to your destination, they come looking for you.
Yeah.
And then, but we turned off on the Trans-Tigga Highway before Radisson, and what did we drive? Like 120 miles on gravel roads.
Oh, it was about 180 miles.
Yeah,
To along parallel to the LG4 with the La
the
Grande
La
River
Grande River, yeah.
to the Polaris River was where the seaplane base was.
Yeah, and that's all. There's LG1, LG2. That's all Hydro-Quebec. Matter of fact, just up the road here where we're sitting, them transmission lines that they just redid from Messina all the way down through. That's where that power's coming
is that
from.
right? I didn't know
Yes.
that. No kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And,
I don't think I've ever seen so much water in my life as they did up there.
but that Trans-Tigga Highway, it's a gravel road, but it's as wide as the state Route 12 out here.
Yeah, remember taping up the lower half of your truck?
Yeah, and
so
if you're brave enough, you can drive 60 miles an hour if you're brave enough. I duct taped my rocker panels. I modified my mud flaps because you were there a couple years before.
Yeah, I had to
and
get
you
the whole lower half of the truck painted.
you
repainted,
sandblasted
yep.
your rocker panels.
Oh, yeah. And you're almost guaranteed to get a cracked windshield on that trip.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it was well worth it, though. What we saw. The amount of fresh water up there and the animals and the fish is unbelievable.
And like you said, once we got to LG4, we flew. I think it was 2.5 hours in a de Havilland Beaver north. We were just somewhere around the 56th or 57th parallel. I think.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
On a Nostopoka River
Yep.
that flows into Hudson Bay.
There was inland seals in there.
Yeah, freshwater seals.
Yep. And we weren't very far off the Hudson Bay there.
Yeah, that was a great trip.
Yep.
You know, we
Good accommodations, hot showers, all the accommodations of home except television, and we had great meals. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
And when we were all successful, everybody.
Oh yeah.
There was 4 of us. We killed 8 bull caribou.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I remember I saw a white a white timber wolf, and what else did we see up there?
Yep.
Remember, we were flying in before we got to the camp. We saw some black bear on the tundra too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember that one night there that wolves came into the camp and carried off my rack attached to the head and everything on my caribou. That was beyond me.
Damaged the cape.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the fishing, we're getting back to the fishing.
Oh my gosh.
That Nastapoka River was where the camp was. It was almost a mile wide. It looked like a lake, but
Yes.
it was a river.
Yep.
And I think we could go 10 miles either way up and down from camp in a boat. And then there was rapids, 10 miles downstream, rapids 10 miles upstream. And remember, you and your dad, me and Mike, the other guy, we were still hunting, trying to fill our other tag. And you and your dad went upstream and then walked up to where the river flattened out again. And you came back and you said you couldn't believe the lake trout fishing right from shore.
Oh, gee. It's
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. The
And I think we went up, after I tagged out, I went up there. I forget who went with me, but
I was with you there.
yeah, I videoed a lot of it. And I tell people this, and they don't believe me. I got to show them the video. Every cast,
Fish.
you either had a strike or you caught a 3 to 10 pound lake trout from shore.
Yeah, from shore.
You know, I wanted to fly fish for them, but the wind was blowing so hard you
So
couldn't
bad,
cast.
yep.
And while we were catching them lake trout, the caribou were swimming the river right where we're fishing.
Didn't we do a shore lunch that day?
The
made
guy
shore-
cooked up a lake
Yeah, he
trout
brought
for
the
us.
frying pan with us. That was awesome.
But I caught. We could only keep. I think it was 2 lake trout, and we pinched the barbs off, and I cut.
yeah.
I cut the treble hook off, so there was just one hook. But I remember landed so many lake trout that day, my lower back started bothering.
Oh yeah.
Because every cast, if you didn't hook them, you had a strike, and you'd see them.
Exactly. Yeah. I know my arm was tired by the
And
end
that
of the day.
water was so cold and oxygenated that they fought like a brook trout, them lake trout. A lot of
did.
people say the lake trout don't fight much. They did.
They did.
Yes.
Yes, they did.
And we did catch brook trout in the rapids. There. I
Right,
think you
right.
caught one that was 5 pounds.
Yeah. I got it mounted. It's here in the office. Yeah, I remember you and I hiked over to that lake there, or no, it was a river, and I remember coming up to the stream, and I says, "Oh darn!" He said, "What's the matter?" Somebody threw some garbage in the stream here, and it was all red, and it took off. And I said, "Oh my gosh, it was a trout."
Yeah.
I didn't realize. I mean, a trout. It was in that stream, and yeah, I mean that's what I wanted to come home with was a trophy brook trout, which I did. But
Well, remember when we flew into camp, there was 2 hunters from the
Boston.
province. No, I thought they were from Ontario province. They were
Oh, okay.
Canadians.
Yeah, maybe
I
they
think.
were. Yeah.
And while we were hunting, they'd already tagged out because they had been in camp.
Yeah.
Remember, every day they were coming back with 5 and 6 pound brook
Brook trout, flaying them out. I was mad.
Yeah, just the most beautiful brook trout you ever
Yeah.
saw. And then by the time we went down to fish them holes in the river, they had caught them. They'd caught all the big brook trout
Yeah,
out of there
right.
because you could keep 5 brook trout. Remember, they were filleting them out, and we ate them
Yeah,
at camp. The cook
yeah.
cooked them up, but you did catch 1 5-pounder, and I think I caught some 3-pounders on my fly rod. But a funny story on that trip. I think you still had a caribou tag.
Yeah.
The rest of us were pretty much tagged out, and we were sitting around the table, and the guides. The only person that could speak English there was the cook's son,
Yeah.
and so he was our translator. And the guide I had, he knew a few English words, but other than that, he spoke French. And I pointed on the map. The Nastapoka River made a giant bend, and there was another set of rapids below where them other guys had fished out all them big
Right.
mature brook trout. And I says to him, "When was the last time somebody fished them rapids?" He says, "Probably 10 years ago." And I said, "That's where I want to go in the morning." And then so we went there, or tried to go there, and you screwed the deal up. You shot a caribou on the way over there, and by the time we processed them and got them in our packs, it was too late to go there, so we never got to fish it.
I forgot that.
It was just funny. But I mean, it was just the amazing thing when I asked him, "When was the last time somebody fished that?" He goes, "Maybe 10 years ago."
10 years ago.
So you imagine
Man,
what brook trout must have been in them holes.
Oh my gosh. Yep.
But yeah, that was a great trip.
I know leaving, I didn't think that plane was ever going to get off the water.
Yeah.
It was weighted down. Holy mackerel!
Yeah, they're amazing plane there.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, normally they make you split one rack.
Yeah.
You can keep one rack whole, but everybody's allowed 2 caribou, and
Yeah.
then they want you to split the other rack for purposes because there's not much room. And I remember we said, can we wait till the pilot gets here and see?
Yeah.
And then I asked him, can we try to shove all them racks in there without splitting them? He goes, yeah. And we didn't split them. We finagled them in there and we flew out of there.
Yeah. Yep. I remember that.
But we were packed in like sardines.
Oh yeah.
And it was for 2 hours. We were sitting in that plane, and you could hardly move. You could turn your head a little bit. And
yeah,
that was
it was tight. It was tight.
No bathroom breaks.
I just remember, man, he ate up almost that whole lake or river getting
Yeah,
off that
yeah.
Stillwater. It was like, boy, that was a long ways. But yeah.
And then we did some fishing trips in Quebec. We went on that walleye trip up there. And,
Oh yeah, love the walleye fishing
yeah,
up there.
yeah, that was a great trip too.
Yep. Yep.
And we do a lot of
brook trout
We did a
fishing.
lot of brook trout fishing here in the Adirondacks. We're gearing up. It's that time of year now. We're gearing up for our spring brook trout fishing now.
Right. Yeah, I can't wait for that. That's going to be good. I think the Adirondacks are coming back for brook trout fishing a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I've fished the Adirondacks for brook trout since I was at Paul Smith's College in the 70s, and I think the brook trout fishing is a lot better today than it was back then.
Yeah, I think that acid,
Seems like there's more and bigger brook trout.
Yeah, it does.
You know?
It does. Well, that's a good thing. Anyway. Well, that's going to do it for episode 2 here on the fishing and hunting and with Wayne Kwasniewski. And want everybody to stay tuned for the next podcast next week. And thanks for stopping by.
Yep.
And thank you for checking in with us here at the Open Gate with Nick at Gateway Properties.